be really good at communication. Okay, because design is communication. And by that I mean it's as much listening to people and what their current situation is, and it's as it is articulating to them what you observe.
Hey everyone, I'm Jonathan, a designer, inventor, maker, and Autodesker. Welcome to Shop Talk, the podcast series where we catch up with designers and makers live from the workshop. Today, we'll be speaking with Spencer Nugent. Spencer is living the designer's dream. He wakes up in the morning, goes for a walk, does some sketching, 3D prints something, plays on his CNC machine, has an idea for this, does that. He's following his passion, sharing it with the world, and making a living on it at the same time. He's best known for his YouTube channel Sketch-A-Day, which focuses on ID sketching and the product design process. But as you'll see from our conversation, there's a lot more to his work than that. So Spencer, for the viewers who don't know you, tell us about the work you do.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. So my history, I guess I'll start with my history. So I'm a bit of what I would consider to be an unconventional industrial designer at this point, but I did start years ago as a math, computer science, physics major in college. So I've generally had a curiosity about things. In fact, I had some family visiting this weekend, and my brother reminded me that when we were kids, we would like mess around with electronics and stuff. And this one time we burned a hole in the carpet. So curiosity and creativity has always been a part of my experience. So as far as like my background goes, studied industrial design, did come from that math background. And so I have an ability, I think, to kind of bridge between the technical aspects of design and then the artistic side, particularly as my dad, I guess he's a lot like me in some ways, in that he has a chemistry background, but he also did fine art on the side. So in the evenings, I have memories of him painting and drawing and looking through all his art books and all of that. So right now, I'm an independent designer, creative, do a lot of work in my garage here, making stuff, tinkering, getting into trouble. And I generally just approach life with, again, that curiosity and a willingness to learn. Um, I learned a new word that kind of describes what that is: autodidact. That's what I am. I like to read and just learn how to do stuff and just go for it. So it's a little bit about my background.
Yeah, we have a lot in common, man. Sounds very familiar to me. I never studied physics though. I couldn't quite get past the math for that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, even now in my spare time, like if I'm not in my shop or my studio working or 3D printing, whatever, I will just watch YouTube videos about physics and math, and it's just enjoyable to me instead of Netflix.
Yeah. So tell us about your work. Like you have the YouTube channel, you've got a book coming out. There's a lot of stuff going on. You have a consultancy and you do these workshops. Could you just kind of run us through like, just kind of just big picture, like what are all the irons you have on the fire?
This is one of the hardest questions for me to answer. People ask me, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" Or, my neighbors will come by, "What are you up to? What are you doing?" And I'm like, well, today this is what I'm doing, but this is only a small piece of what I do. So I appreciate the mention. As you mentioned, I have a YouTube channel, and that's a big part of marketing for me. I love drawing, always have. Sometimes I'm super active on the channel. Other times I take a little break. I'm kind of in a break right now, but that's a big part of it. So it's about getting my work out there in terms of the drawing, visual communication aspect of design, because no matter what project I'm on, I'm always thinking, how do I visualize this before I get started? I'm staring at my mailbox right now because I'm about to redo that and I'm about to build it in Fusion, but I have sketches and I have ideas, right? So that's a big part of it. As far as other work goes, it's consulting with businesses, helping them come up with solutions to problems. Pretty standard industrial design stuff. So I've worked on everything from toys to consumer electronics. I've done car concepts as well. I've done outdoor spaces. I've designed homes. So I do a lot of things in that regard. And then on the side, and this is where I guess before I get to that, I also consult with businesses on design strategy and visual communication specifically. I also teach design online. as part of an online collective of contemporaries and professionals. We put together a program at the beginning of the pandemic because we saw an opportunity to kind of shake things up in the education space. So I'm a part of that. And then in my spare time, I enjoy making music for my YouTube channel. So it's a little side hobby, if you will. Of course, I do video work and promotional content as well. And I think the last thing, man, I do so many things. Oh, woodworking, and then I have a little home goods brand that I've been working on feverishly right now because I do this with my sister. She's also a designer, and we do, at least I do, home goods and handcrafted products, specifically in the realm of home decor. She's an artist, but we're getting ready for a local craft market, so we do that every year.
And you don't sleep, apparently.
I do sleep. Sometimes, this weekend was interesting. It's interesting you mentioned sleep because I had been going just nonstop on a home improvement project that I was working on. I did some roofing and some fencing and a few other things. And eventually, you know what? Your body just says enough, and then you sleep. So on Saturday, I slept from like 8 till 8, full 12 hours. It was crazy.
Nice,
So
nice. You've earned it, I
eventually
think.
catches up with you. Either your beard goes gray or your body forces you to sleep, but either way,
Yeah.
that's what happens. I guess on top of that too, and this isn't a job so much, but I do. I'm a full time single dad, so I usually they're off with their mom at this point, but usually I have my kids full time, and so they'll either watch me do projects or help me do some of the projects as well, and that's always a treat.
I'd imagine that, like myself, a lot of our viewers have considered a pivot to freelance work. Can you tell us how you got into that and what it's like?
Oh man, that's a wow. Now you're taking me back. So in 2019, before I even knew the world was going to, or at least it felt like the world was ending, I quit my job. And up until that point, I was working corporate for about almost 6 years in the smart home IoT space. And it was really cool because I got to work with a lot of cross-functional teams. And specifically with design, uh, there's effectively a few paths you can take. So you could be a freelancer and just do your own thing. Probably not the smartest thing to do right out of school. You can go to a consultancy, which I did that as well. I was in San Francisco for a while working for Astro Studios, now part of PA Consulting. Did that for a couple of years. Then I ran my own business with a friend of mine. And interestingly enough, it also preceded, or it was or coincided rather, with this global crisis at the time, the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, right? So did that for a while, learned a lot of stuff. I mean, that was like getting thrown into the deep end of life and just, trying to balance the responsibility of having a partner and kids and making an income and trying to chart our way through this crisis. So learned a lot of stuff. It was a master class in real life hard knocks, grit, just working hard. And then I think for us, and I'll get to your original question, but for us it was kind of a pragmatic, mature decision at the time to then not do that business anymore because we felt like we had reached the limit of our experience and then decided to go corporate. So I took the route of consultancy to running my own business to then saying, hey, you know what? We gotta go learn some more stuff. So went corporate, did that for 5.5 years. That's where I worked with all those teams, and then got to see the bigger picture of design. Because sometimes, particularly when I'm working with clients, they'll look at design and what I do as maybe a bit in a reductive sense, like, oh, you can do this, it's really easy, or you can make this look good for us, right? But then when you work corporate design, you get to see all the thought that goes into any product that a customer is going to use. And by that, I mean the strategy up front, thinking about the market. Then comes the concept, well, research and concept, and then the engineering side and getting things out to market. So full stack product development, right? So that was a fantastic experience. In 2019, like I said, right before the pandemic hit, and I had no idea, I thought, you know what? And this is somewhat related to the first question, which is, what do you do? I do a lot of things. And it was the same thing in corporate. I did a lot of things there. Sometimes I was helping the engineers with their projects. Sometimes I was working strategy. Sometimes I was just doing straight industrial design. So it kind of felt like they didn't really know what to do with me, and role wise, it was difficult. Where I was doing all those things. In fact, I even led a UX team at one point for some time. Fantastic experience as well. So I decided to jump off and do my own thing. And that was September 2019. Took a month off and decided to just breathe, just take some time to think. Thankfully, I had the resources and the means and the wherewithal to do that. And I forced myself to not work for a month, whole month, just like, I'm not going to work. I'm just going to, kind of get off the hamster wheel, so to speak, and then just exist. And I think that was a good pause. And that's the first part of answering your question. It was a good pause for me because then I was able to get back in touch with certain things that I loved, particularly drawing. Where in the corporate realm, I was drawing on whiteboards and diagramming things, but not necessarily tapping into that artistic side that I really liked. So taking that month off allowed me to reconnect there. And then I was able to reach out to clients and start building up a roster of work. And one thing I tell people about this particular experience is that the opportunities that have come my way since sometimes aren't even related to that period of time so much as it is related to relationships that I've formed and forged over the years. So my advice to people is be a good person because you never know when that person you met 10 years ago is actually going to show up and say, hey, can you work with us? We'd love to work with you. And that's exactly what happened at that point. So it was a bit unnerving in some regards because, yeah, I was jumping off into the unknown and I forced myself to take that break. But I also trusted in the process. One of my mantras, well, I'll tell you a short story real quick. So in this time, after the month of taking a break, I would have a panic attack every Tuesday. I don't know why it was every Tuesday, but for some reason on Tuesdays, my heart would race and I would just be like, oh, what am I doing? Are you stupid? What are you doing? You got to, you're taking this break from corporate design or, a typical industrial design career. And I had to remind myself that passion is the process and I should just trust the path that I'm on. And maybe that sounds a little bit woo-woo or esoteric in some ways, but for me, it was a good reminder that I wasn't in love with the process of corporate design so much as I was in love with the passion behind what I was doing. I was very much an emotional designer. I went with my gut a lot, and I learned to trust my gut in my career. And so I had to remind myself that moving forward, trust the process, just breathe, and everything will be okay. And you know what? It's worked out. It's absolutely worked out. And there are some differences. With corporate design, there's predictability. There's a certain element of certainty as it relates to your pay or compensation or opportunities or projects or whatever. But I would not trade the peace and happiness that I have now for corporate life. Not right now. I'm in my garage. I do a lot of work here, and like I said, in my other space in my studio. If you watch my YouTube videos, you'll see that space, and I just love it. So
this is Shop Talk, so we have to talk about your shop. Tell us a little bit about that. You're in your wood shop now. I know you do 3D printing. Obviously, you do your whole design sketching and prototyping and all that. How does your shop work? What does that look like?
I generally work in 3-4 places, and I work out of my home. So this is quite literally my home. Organizations always struggle, but I do have some sort of system going here. To my right, I have my CNC and woodworking stuff. You can see I've got a little Festool there. I have several Festools. I love their products. Probably too much. It's a problem. But this is where I do anything when I'm working with wood or plastics, any sort of casting or cement work as well. So I'll do that here, and glass cutting as well. So my glass cutter is behind me. I've got the CNC laser as well. And then when I'm coming up with concepts and ideas, this is why I say 3 or 4 places. Sometimes I'll sketch in bed, I'll just kind of scribble or doodle something. But usually I work in my kitchen. I just like being there. I've got my music, I've got my nano leaf lights, and it just helps for me. That environment just helps the ideas flow. I don't know what it is, but I like working there. And if I'm not ideating there, I'll go for a walk, like I said, and just think of concepts as I'm walking and come back and still doodle them. And then I've got my studio downstairs, which is where I do my YouTube production stuff. Or if I'm doing any sort of serious digital sketching, I've got a 24-inch Wacom Cintiq that I sketch on. Got my Mac Pro downstairs as well there. And then that's where I have my 3D printers. So I've got three Prusa i3 MK3s, and then I've got two Bamboo P1P printers, which have been awesome. They're so fast. But that's where I do my 3D printing prototypes. So I've got downstairs 3D printing, kitchen for sketching and ideating, and then outside for the woodworking, casting, glass cutting, that kind of thing.
Okay, so the thinking there, I'm guessing, is you keep the messy stuff all together, and the quiet, clean stuff gets to be in the other space, and is
Yeah,
that
I
kind of thinking
mean,
with that?
I'm not I'm not 3D printing anything like I'm not doing ASA and ABS and stuff like that in that room. And I do have an air filter that's always running in that room in any case. But yeah, anything that's super messy, I do outside on my driveway or in my garage. I do have plans. I have a slab in my backyard actually, and I've been sketching ideas for what I'm calling my shedio. So it's going to be a shed studio where I can kind of um, just have a dedicated space for some of the stuff that I'm doing that is a bit messier. So that's in the works for early fall. I'll be able to finish that up. So.
Can't wait to see that. Hope you make some video about that process. So let me just we'll do a quick thought experiment here.
Okay.
So let's imagine Big Toaster needs you to convince everyone to buy a new toaster, even though they already have one.
Uh-huh.
All right. So how do you go about solving that problem?
I think, well, my perspective on this is it's important to, as a designer, be really good at communication. Okay, because design is communication, and by that I mean it's as much listening to people and what their current situation is, and it's as it is articulating to them what you observe, right? Because oftentimes people aren't capable, and I don't mean this to be condescending or anything like that, but oftentimes someone who has an existing product may not be able to communicate what the next version of that product should be, or what that thing they're missing is. So one of my favorite experiences and ways of doing this is by, if possible, observing people use their products. So Big Toaster says, "Hey, design the next toaster." I would want to observe people using the toaster. What do they use it for? Is it just bread? Do they put pizza slices in their toaster? Are there any unconventional things that they do? Because therein might lie an opportunity that people hadn't even thought of, right? And that's called looking at compensatory behaviors. So using a product in an unconventional way can sometimes lead to what I call a probertunity, a problem and opportunity. So it's not always, hey, this toaster is really frustrating. There might be things that you as a designer don't even know, right? So it's my job to communicate, to listen, to observe, and then say, hey, what if your toaster could do that thing that you're doing and do it better than the way you're doing it? And then the lights go off in the head. Of course, and I didn't come up with this particular point of view, but from a business perspective, it's also my job to understand the desirability of whatever solution I'm coming up with. So is this something that people are going to want? And that's in part due to the functional proposal that's inherent to the concept that you're putting forward, as it is the aesthetics of that product. So where is this going to fit in someone's home? Does it match the aesthetic wishes of that target customer? Is this product going to say something about them? There's a reason people buy SMEG appliances or Brayville as opposed to KitchenAid, for example, right? It's because aesthetically and arguably functionally, those brands have a certain messaging that resonates with people. So you kind of have to understand that. And then there's the business aspect. Okay, not every company is going to be KitchenAid, right? There is a certain customer that appreciates price or the relationship between price and functionality. So you kind of have to find a balance there. Hey, we can't make this thing out of billet aluminum because we're not going to be able to hit that price point, right? So you kind of have to understand how to navigate that. And then, and I think this is what makes industrial designers special, we have to understand the feasibility. So sure, it'd be great to have a propane, and I'm just, spitballing here. It'd be great to have a gas fueled, like a propane natural gas fuel toaster, because that gets the perfect char and Maillard effect on the toast. But it's not practical, right? Because not everyone has that. So you have to think about desirability, viability, and feasibility, and the combination of those things would then be the ideal concept. Now, as a freelancer, independent designer, I think one of the downsides is you're not always at the level of conversation that would allow you to guide the product development in a way that leads to the outcome that you want, right? But therein lies, I think, the paradox or conundrum with design, in that sometimes designers want their thing to be the product, the solution. But really, again, this is why I say design is communication. It's really about understanding that customer need and then delivering that thing, right? It's not about what I want, but it's about what the customer needs. And so you have to be able to kind of seed your own wishes in favor of what the customer and the business. And sometimes that means the end user, and sometimes it means the company. But you have to seed your own wishes for those outcomes.
Yeah. Great. So that's a really good picture of kind of the conceptual process behind it, like what the framework is around it to make a good product. Can you talk a little bit about your practical process? Like, do you start from sketching and then do the foam models, or like at what point do you get into 3D? Like, how does that hands-on workflow tend to work in the toaster scenario? I know it's different for every product, but
So I'm weird. I sometimes, as I'm looking outside here, sometimes I'll go for a walk and I'll just think about it first. And I say I'm weird because, and this always throws people off. I struggle sometimes to visualize without drawing, but other times I like to just walk and just think. What are the parameters? What are the requirements? How might I go about this? But I don't necessarily have a concrete idea in my head. But I do design sometimes in my head, thinking more so in a functional way as opposed to aesthetics. But I do sketch a lot. I have a few sketches here with me of just little ideas that I have, whether it's related to something personal, like in this case, this is my mailbox I want to do for my house. So I'm kind of thinking through that, and I have plans to build it in Fusion. And so I will sketch something out first. In fact, another technique I'll use, depending on the product that I'm working on, is I'll take a picture of where the product's going to be and then use digital sketching to concept the product so that it's in context. Okay, and that matters because if it doesn't fit where it's supposed to go, then you're probably designing the wrong thing. So in terms of process, absolutely love sketching. I do a lot of thinking, like I said, first, because in with the experience I've had, I've been doing this for about 20 years now, a little less than 20 years, but I find it more efficient to think before I actually just start sketching. When I was younger, I would just sketch to sketch, but now I'm a lot more thoughtful about what I do. And not every product or project I work on begins with a sketch. Okay, sometimes I'll just jump right into Fusion and start going. And not to sound too salesy, but coming from another product, I don't know if you want me to mention competitors or not, but I used to be a hardcore Solidworks guy because that was how I was trained to develop CAD for engineering. But I love the flexibility that Fusion gives me. So it's almost like it's not a bad thing to start in Fusion because it's so flexible, and I don't feel like I'm going to be pulling my hair out if I did the wrong thing. I mean, I can literally just pick a face and do an extrusion and start cutting and doing stuff. And so in some ways, Fusion can be a sketch tool, and I've used it that way. But I still do love pen and paper. And then depending on the client or the problem, I'll use my tools that I have. So next to me, I've got a CNC cutter. I've got a laser cutter back there as well. And like I mentioned, I have 3D printers, and then I will prototype these things before actually committing to make them. And so those are kind of the techniques that I use. And then, of course, document that using video or photos as necessary to kind of show that prototyping thinking process.
It's great to hear you say that, because so my background's architecture. That's what I got my degree in, and that's what I used to do for a living before I moved to the Fusion team, and I've been doing product design for a while. But I've always struggled to like do that first step I know I'm supposed to do, which is sketch something out first. Like you need to draw it before you can jump into CAD, But I feel a little better hearing that from a real professional like yourself, that it's okay to just kind of start doing 3D modeling first if you've got a pretty clear idea in your head of what you're looking for.
I sometimes I feel like designers, and not to like criticize the whole industry. That's not what I'm saying, but just my observations as an educator, mentor, and professional designer. Sometimes I feel like we approach things linearly. And for me, with my sketching, I will sketch something, model it, then go back and sketch again. Or I'll 3D print it and then draw on it if I need to, or maybe hack a piece off or whatever, to like just capture that feeling or that idea so that I can iterate, right? So it's all about iteration. And just because you've done your sketches doesn't mean you can't go back and do your sketches, or just because you've done your CAD doesn't mean you can't go sketching and do more CAD. So it's kind of like you go through these cycles, if you will. And I think it's important, if you are a designer, creative person, like don't feel like you are constrained to your process. Which goes back to what I said. Passion is the process, not process is the passion. Like I had it flipped in my head for a long time. Oh, I gotta have this process. But no, it's really about passion, because sometimes it's a feeling or it's a thought, or you just have this flash in your head, like, oh, this would be really cool. And then you sketch it up and you think, oh, this could be really cool. And then you got to figure out how to model it. And then you model it and you're like, oh, this is actually not a good idea. And then you have to, I do that all the time. Like it's not like I think of something and it's perfect. Sometimes I get lucky and I'll do something and think, oh yeah, this is good. Or get the feedback that it's good, but it's not always the case.
It's a really great thing for anybody who's listening or watching to consider when you're just getting started with this stuff, is that, as you can see here with Spencer, 20 years into his career, you still make mistakes all the time. And that's a critical part of the process. That's great, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And you might notice in the background, if there's tubs, right? There's tubs of ideas, there's tubs of little plastic parts and things that I've tried and failed. I have a hard time letting go of ideas sometimes. I have ideas that I've had for years that I still tinker with or modify and think, oh, maybe if I just do this or that, I can make it better, right? I think it's important to document. It's important to keep your stuff and still be willing to revisit those ideas. If you felt something, you felt it for a reason. And I think it's important to just not entirely give up on things, but try and just keep iterating and see where you end up.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that we at Autodesk on the Fusion 360 team are interested in your journey going from Solidworks to Fusion. You just gave us a really clear picture of your process and the different pieces that go together to make your workflow happen. Could you tell us a little bit about what that was like why you moved to Fusion? What are the things you prefer about it? That kind of stuff.
So my big move to Fusion was accelerated or the catalyst was leaving my corporate job. So you leave and you realize, oh, well, I don't have corporate resources anymore. I don't have $5,000 for a software license or $3,000 more. So I need to find a tool that'll do what I need to do. So that's where Fusion came in. It was affordable. It was accessible. Started out with a DIY license. And I don't know if y'all still do this, but the things I love about Fusion, I feel like there are people behind the product. Okay. With other products, you don't know who the development team is. If you do get support, it feels very, very corporate and impersonal. And the first thing I did, I contacted a friend of mine, Jeff Smith. I don't know if you know who he is. And I was like, Jeff, help me out here. I'm coming from Solidworks, going to Fusion. He's like, I got you. And he sat down with me and like explained stuff. And that was worth so much to me because I felt like, oh, this is like it wasn't salesy. It was like he cares about the product, he has similar experience. And I felt like just really good that y'all were willing to sit down with someone. And I consider myself just a dude, right? And I felt like, oh, they're willing to sit down with someone like me and explain the product. Very cool. The next thing was in that explanation, just seeing how flexible the app was. I mean, just the form tool alone for a designer is a complete godsend. Like you could just start with a shape and start pushing and pulling or extruding faces or cylindrifying things, or it's wonderful. And I still use the form tool if I'm doing organic things, or if I need to quickly specific, mostly organic things, or if I need to quickly explore an idea or concept in a loose way, I'll use the form tool. Even being able to model in a way that didn't feel so constrained. I don't have a better word for it. Constraints aren't a bad thing, right? When you're doing a sketch or you're trying to use parametric formulas to create a sequence of objects or whatever. Like that's not a bad thing per se, but there were just so many limitations, I think, in SolidWorks at the time that sometimes it felt like a chore to model and not so much like it was actually fun. So on my laptop, I usually just have Fusion open. It's open right now because I have these ideas and I'm able to just kind of tinker. So there was that. There was the cloud-based aspect of storing my files. So whether I was here or on another machine, I could just access my stuff, and that felt really cool. Not just felt really cool, like it was awesome to be able to travel and not feel like, oh, I forgot my file on this USB drive somewhere and I can't use it. And then the other thing I love about Fusion is the CAD to CAM workflow, right? So again, there was another situation where I bought this Inventables X Carve, that's my CNC that I use, and I knew I could use it with Fusion, but I didn't know how. And so again, because the company, Autodesk and the support team for Fusion are so awesome, I was just like, hey, I need some help understanding how to leverage this CAM workflow. And I don't remember who it was. And my apologies, whoever it was, if you're listening, but sat down with me and spent like an hour and a half explaining the CAD to CAM workflow. And I was able to download the post processor for my machine, and I was able to learn all the commands, at least in the 2D and 3D carving workflow for CNC to kind of help me out. And that was awesome, right? And I was able to start tinkering and playing there. So those are the things that for me made a huge difference. Feeling like the team actually cared and cares to this day. And I'm not being paid to say that for anyone listening, like I'm not. This is just how it is. And I actually tell people, even as I teach, so I teach a class about Fusion right now, or that incorporates Fusion, I should say. And I'll tell them, hey, if you have any questions, contact support, look at the knowledge base, because there are actual people there who will answer and they are willing to help. And that to me makes a huge difference.
That's great, man. Really glad to hear all that stuff. You're going to make a lot of people at the company happy. I mean, we really do try hard to support the community and do everything we can to make sure you're successful with what we have. So it's awesome to hear that. Yeah. So kind of getting back to the business side of things. I mean, you've got all these different ventures going on at the same time. Are they interdependent? Like, is that, do they, does the YouTube channel support this thing? And is this a, kind of a way to get the word out about the book and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So fantastic question, actually. The reason I wrote a book is because of, well, it's all connected. There's a relationship I formed actually with Autodesk back when Sketchbook Pro was a part of Autodesk, that later got me into another situation connected to my YouTube where my publisher saw what I did. They saw that I was speaking, that I was teaching, that I was good at good at visual communication. And they said, hey, do you want to write a book? So yes, I used my YouTube channel to promote the book, but that opportunity came up because of the YouTube channel. And then, Instagram is another big following that I have where I've been able to use that to promote my work, my content, get work through it as well. So I do try to uh, build on. I do try to have these properties, these things build on each other. So I don't want to. I don't want to put everything out there, but my plan is to say, for example, with my book, have a course related to the book so that these things are accretive, they build on each other. And then, things like websites, I'll make sure that things are linked or um, kind of reducing the effort that I have to do in terms of like creating that awareness. Everything kind of works with everything else.
Yeah. Okay. And could you talk a little bit about the costs associated with starting these different ventures? Like, is it a heavier lift to write a book than it is to develop a YouTube channel? Or any of the other things too? It's like we're just kind of looking to. I feel like the audience would be interested to know, like, is it really difficult to get a consultancy going, or like, is the workshop thing hard, or and then also like the cost benefit of each one of these things you do.
I think it depends on what your end goal is. So one thing I try to keep in mind is that when I'm designing now, it's not designed for mass consumption so much as it is mass appreciation. And I say that to remind myself that my goal is not to make a billion things and have those out in the world, but to make, I'm content making 1,000 good things as opposed to a million or a billion little things that people throw away and don't care about. So in terms of operating costs and starting up, getting back to your question, is I'm willing to invest as needed to align with that goal. Okay. In the case of YouTube, I had to build a studio out, and fortunately, again, this is pre-pandemic before everyone was chronically online. I had invested in a studio, so I got some SLR cameras, and I built this out the hard way. So in terms of cost, I made a lot of mistakes, right? I got the wrong lights or started out with the wrong camera. I had to sell or return those or whatever, but eventually was able to invest. So I probably spent, if you want hard numbers, I probably spent about $20,000 on my YouTube studio, and that's paid back, paid itself off, right? Because in terms of marketing, the opportunities that come my way, and of course the revenue I get from my YouTube channel. In the case of my garage shop here, we're probably not break even yet in terms of that cost, because I've chosen rather to invest in certain machinery or things like the CNC, the laser cutters, the 3D printers that pay for themselves for sure. So I chose specifically to invest my own money. I didn't want to be dependent on or beholden to any sort of investment that wasn't mine, because my end goal didn't necessitate having that investment up front. Again, I'm not trying to make a billion things or a million things, but rather do what I love and do it well. So if I can see a way to recoup that cost, I'll invest in the tool. All right. So I saw an ad, for example, online for a desktop water jet. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Should I get this? And I sit with that thought and I go, no, I'm not ready for that yet. So then I don't do it. So it's kind of a balance between what do I want to do? What's my vision in terms of creating a product or a solution? And is it worth investing? And then I'll make that choice, and I'll invest upfront for that. But usually the things that I do, and this is related to your previous question as well, usually they relate to each other so that that revenue stream kind of pays for the tools or the resources that I'm acquiring to make these products.
Nice. Yeah, that's great, man. So let's segue into 50/50 creative from there. I've been, just so everyone knows, I've been following your work since I started learning design sketching back in 2014. Your YouTube channel is awesome. Time. Yeah. It was super helpful getting started with this stuff, because it's really, it's intimidating when you're not used to thinking like that and like, kind of trusting yourself to do a sketch and all. So it's been super helpful with that. But this new stuff you're working on that I just found out about last week is 50/50 creative, where you're actually like developing consumer products. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that actually started again when I left my corporate job. And so it's kind of my catch-all entity for my creative work. And the name 50/50 Creative Labs, it relates to what I consider to be a core principle, which is I don't want to spend all my time working for people. So I wanted to be able to build a life and a process where it allowed me to spend theoretically half my time working on things I want to work on for myself, and the rest of the time I spend working on stuff for clients. So even this week, I have obligations for clients that probably will take up half my time, and the rest of the time I can do whatever I want. Or sometimes it means, half the month I'm doing stuff for a client, and then the other half of the month I'm not. So it's related to that mindset and idea. And under that 50/50 Creative Labs, I have my brand VSL, which stands for Very Salt Lake. And that's my home goods brand. So that's where I make little crafty objects, like very simple, but a little container storage. You can use a planter or objects in that kind of thing. I'm huge into organization, even though I'm not very organized, but I like the idea of organization. People like that too. So I've been doing a bit of that as well. So that's where I have full creative control over the functionality of a product, the building of that product. I manufacture everything at my home here using processes that I learn, I prototype, and I sell those. And usually I do that at two local events, but I also have an online store where I sell those products. I've done everything from lighting. There's a lamp in the background right there. So I've done lighting lamps. And that's kind of where VSL, that brand, started, where at the beginning of the pandemic, I had that time, 50/50, and I wanted to create some stuff. And I had this idea um, to recycle bottles. So I learned how to cut glass bottles. I learned how to, finish the edges and work with glass. I hadn't done it before, but being an autodidact, I decided to read and learn and trial and error. So moved up from scoring bottles. Now I have a glass saw behind me here on my shelf that I use to cut these balls. Anyhow, combination of recycled glass, 3D printing, but also leverage my woodworking skills, started making these. And because it was the pandemic, no one knew what was happening. I actually held a driveway show on my driveway in my neighborhood. And that was really cool. I wanted to put my stuff out there and just create some awareness. And that was the first step. And from there, things kind of started snowballing and rolling, slow rolling, because again, this is not my primary thing in terms of like, this is all I do, because I do a lot of things. But it was a good experience for me to get those products out. And from there, I've started simplifying a few of the product offerings and trying to create a good balance between repeatability, manufacturability, and again, this idea of desirability, right? So playing with those variables. I can't I can't always make a lamp that has a cement base, for example. You can see a few samples on that website because, well, one, it's time intensive, and two, because it's time intensive, the cost is prohibitive for a certain segment of the market. So I have to kind of strike that balance. But I still do custom orders for people in the same vein, same flavor. But in terms of these other objects, you can kind of see here, I've got a container here. I've got little trays as well. And these are all done in Fusion, and they nest together for organization. But started creating more accessible products within that brand so that I can kind of get those out to people that way. So that's a little bit about 50/50. It's for me an experiment, but it's born out of love. It's again related to that idea of passion is the process. Maybe it's a little bit of me not always thinking before I leap, but I always seem to make it work in the sense that I can come up with the idea in my head. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if? And then I just do that thing. So a couple things on the horizon. I am working on some timepieces, some home decor timepieces or clocks. And I have some organizational products for electronics as well that I have sketches stuff anyways, and some light CAD models. And I've even gotten into making candles. So I started making candles and using my laser cutter to do some of my branding for those products as well.
Cool, man. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. I wonder, like, could you tell us a little bit about something that surprised you about bringing a product to market? So you've got the organizational stuff, you've got the lamps you were talking about. Coming up with an idea. What if I've made this thing and then I'm putting it out there, hoping people will buy it? What were some things that you didn't anticipate that you've learned in that space?
Not everyone's going to value what you do the way you value what you do. That's one thing I've learned. So I mentioned efficiencies in process. So I started out making some lamps. I don't have one here with me, or I'd show you, but you can see them on the website. Really time intensive, super fun, but each lamp would take several hours to make, and the price reflects that. And as well, it reflects my attention to detail and the craftsmanship behind those lamps. But it's hard to sometimes have, especially when you're starting out fresh, you start out from scratch. No one really know, at least in the local scene here, no one knows that brand specifically. It's hard to, I guess, connect to the value of your time and effort and idea, or of the idea, to the price that you're asking for the product. So you have to, as a designer, not only conceptualize the thing and know how to make it, but also market, right? And that's related to telling the story of the process. Because when people see that, and at these markets that I do, I actually have a brochure that goes through and shows the process and talks about the story of, pardon me, how I came about it. And then the lights go off in your head. Oh, okay, we see now, we understand, right? So it takes some time, and you have to. I think you have to be patient with yourself, right? Because I want everyone to want these things, and all these orders to come in, but you have to, I think, be pragmatic in that sense and realize that it's not only important to make the product, but also it will sell the product, which is also related to another challenge, which is when you make something, you have to know your limitations, right? I have certain tools at my disposal, and those tools have limitations. My CNC machine, as much as I love it, it doesn't have a fourth axis or fifth axis even. I don't have an automatic tool changer. I have to think about ways to be able to create jigs and fixtures, right, that allow me to uh, tool change, so to speak, right? And I've been able to do some of that with 3D printing. And this is just a simple one, just making something like a little square, for example, or a little gauge that helps you position a part for repeatability, right? So you're not pulling your hair out. So things like that. Understand your limitations, then get creative. Okay, I got a 3D printer. I got this CNC. I'm going to make something on a 3D printer that helps me do this tool change. So awesome. Understanding your limitations is something you may not think about before you make that product, right? I started getting into casting silicone molds. For example, this is a little spice dish that I came up with. So it's cast cement, right? So these are some of my first cement products. I've always wanted to do that. So that's a new world. But again, I have to understand those limitations. Okay, what is the structural requirement of this piece of cement? Okay, this, it's a compound surface on the inside, and I have these vertical sides. So structurally, it's sound. But I tried making some thinner objects and realized very quickly that cement was not the best material for casting. Right. So now I got to think. Okay, if I want to continue with this idea, I need to pick a different material. Right. I need to perhaps pick some sort of two-part plastic that I can pour into the mold. So understand your limitations. Not everyone's going to value your stuff the way that you do, and I guess that's related in some ways to marketing as well, which is challenging. Like there's a creative requirement for coming up with the product, and it can be beautiful, it could be awesome, but you do have to to market that in some way. So those have been two things I think for me that have been challenges, but I'm figuring it out. I'm figuring out ways to get products in front of people. Also, don't underestimate the value of friends and people who can help you get the word out as well.
Yeah, that's great, man. So it's the end of the world and your shop didn't survive the apocalypse. Okay. You got to start from scratch. So what's your first tool?
Whew, if I had to start from scratch, oh man, probably my 3D printer. I'd have to just have a 3D printer and a laptop. Does it have to be one tool? Okay, if it's one tool, it's my laptop. I mean, let's be real. I gotta have some sort of computer. Next, I'd have a 3D printer, and then from there, probably to toss it between the CNC and maybe my Festool TS55.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stacking good stuff.
Nice. Cool, man.
I mean, with a 3D printer, you can make other tools, right? So I think that's a good place to start. Certainly, you can't do everything, but it'd be a great place to be. Assuming we still have electricity, anyways.
Yeah. So you assume there's still electricity. I think this is that we talked about this before we started recording here. This is kind of the scenario I'd imagine. Your shop's gone, all your stuff's gone. But assume you can get electricity. So you've already gotten like the generator or the solar panels or whatever it is. But it is the apocalypse, so it's really risky to go get the thing you need, right? So it's like, what do you take the risk to get first? Sounds like a 3D printer.
3D printer, probably the Voron 0.1 that I haven't built yet, but assuming I built it, then yeah, I would take that because it's small. I could just grab that thing and just run with it or whatever I need to do. Plus, it would be capable of printing a variety of materials, so that would be where I'd start.
Nice, cool, man.
And I'd need the laptop so I could have Fusion. Assuming the cloud is still active, I mean, there's something there. I mean, I know there's some local storage, but in any case, I would need Fusion. I need my 3D printer, and that would help me get started.
You can count on us, man. Even if it's the apocalypse, we'll make sure that cloud's still up.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, man. This is great. Hey, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion 360 for yourself, go here or find the link in our description.